Hello everyone, this is Kinda Huyiko, and today I will be teaching you guys about how to convert your model into SourceFilmMaker. So let's get quickly started by talking about the model itself. So the first step we need when it comes to the SourceFilmMaker process is to have the model in Blender. Now just a heads up, everything that I am going to be using to convert the model to SourceFilmMaker will be in the description below. I not only have links to add-ons in case you have a file format such as VRM, MMD, XNA and file formats like that. I have Blender add-ons in the description for that. I also have a link that should be a SourceFilmMaker beginner package, which will contain a base QC file, a base Blender file, for a file with some settings set up for you already. Some of them, but we still have to fill out some stuff. And also a base rig with its own, which is in the base file of the blend, as well as an SBX version of the rig in case you need, if you want to completely make a new weight paint of the character, or you want to reference the size and the scaling and all that. Because it is quite a big rig, and SourceFilmMaker models need pretty big models. But besides that though, check the description, make sure to download the programs such as VTF Edit, make sure to download the Source Blender Tools add-on. In this case, which in our case it will look like this, the Source Engine Export tools here, we will definitely need this in order to convert our models to SourceFilmMaker, and that's about it. So the first step we need is to get our model in Blender, and as I said, there's add-ons that can help you convert your models into Blender. If you have an FBX model already, like if you have like a VR chat model and it's already in FBX, you can also import that as well. If you have any project files that already have a Blender model in there, you are good to go. You can save it and make a duplicate of it, which is very convenient, but we can move on from there. So once your model is in Blender, the first thing that we definitely need is to make sure that the rigging is correct. So I'm going to be going over the rig skeleton and the bone names, because this is very, very important that the bone names are correct. This will definitely help you out when it comes to setting up IKs in SourceFilmMaker, as well as mapping out bones much easier. So yeah, keep that in mind. And also, this is very beneficial if you're considering on making mods for said character. Now, for my model right here, it's a T pose, but most of the time in SourceFilmMaker they have it as an H pose. So let me quickly pose my character to kind of give you like a idea on what I mean by an H pose. So an H pose is kind of like a pose, except it's mainly like where the fingers are curled up, so it'll look like this. So something like that. That's just for reference. So yeah, this is what SourceFilmMaker H poses would technically look like, which I would recommend you having a pose like this for SourceFilmMaker, but it's fine if you have your model as A pose or T pose. You can always map animations. For mods you might want to keep it H pose, but this really depends on what you're using the model for. But anyways, besides that, let's go more in depth on the bone names, since this is very important. Now, for some extra information, if you are a Vroid model and you have insane, weird looking bone names, there's actually an add-on that can automatically rename those bones for you really quickly. Go to the link in the description, find the part that says something along the lines of Vroid rename bone something, and then click the link, download the add-on. There's instructions on how to use it and how to install it in the GitHub, and everything should work just fine. So yeah, so let's continue on. So right here, this is named BIP collar R. This is named BIP upper arm R. And remember, there's the underscore R, and then on the other side there's the BIP collar underscore L right here. I recommend have the underscores there. Now there is a different version of the BIPs that you can rename it. such as the valve BIP name, but I would recommend probably stick with this one. But you can always use a valve version, the valve BIP names. Those are perfectly fine. They should work the same way. The BIP lower arm R, there's the BIP hand, and then for the fingers, you're going to have the names of pinky. You're going to start with the number 0, and then go from 1 and then 2, as you can see there. Pinky, ring, and then middle finger right here, and then index finger, and then your thumb, like that. So there you go. And then if you want, you could also name your extra bones, like the hair, as BIP hair, or BIP eyes, or BIP like right here I have BIP buttocks, or BIP breast, or something like that. Basically, like, name it wherever. If you want to keep it organized, you can. For extra bone names, you don't have to rename it, but I recommend keeping it for organizing purposes. So then you have the head, the BIP head, the BIP neck, the BIP spine. Now I have 4 spine bones, so it goes from 0, 1, 2, and 3. Then you have the BIP pelvis, BIP hip, and remember, keep in mind this little extra bone here, that's more of an optional thing I did. Ignore that bone. Same with the extra elbow here thing. That's just an extra. Don't worry about it. That tiny little bone. But there's BIP knee, and then you have BIP foot, and then you have BIP toe. So yeah. Those are pretty much the bone names. As I said, with extra bones, you can always rename it however you like, but it's your choice on what you want to name it. Now, another thing we also have to go over is blend shapes. Blend shapes are super duper important, and we need to be aware about the blend shapes because, especially with Vroid models, they have underscores in almost every single blend shape, and you're not allowed to have underscores in the blend shapes because they will be detected as corrective blend shapes, which they will not work in SourceFilmMaker. So you need to rename it. So I highly recommend properly renaming your stuff, like blink, and then have wink. And if you're trying to indicate something like a left and a right, make sure to have like a dot instead of an underscore. But just remove the underscores, and if it works, like if there's no duplicates in your blend shapes, you should be good to go. Name it however you like, just do not have underscores at all. And I also avoided spaces as well. I kept everything together, so there's that. But yeah, just stick with no spaces and just having a dot, and you should be pretty good on the blend shape area. Now, before we get started on the source engine export, I do need to emphasize a lot that you need to make sure that your model is in the appropriate size. Most of VRM models, or even PMX models, otherwise known as MMD models, they tend to be a lot smaller in comparison with original SourceFilmMaker models. Right here, I have it already scaled up, but as I said, I do have the rig in the description, which you can scale your model up to, or even taller, just for reference. You can also even import models such as the TF2 models or the Left 4 Dead models, so that way you can have a more proper scaling. Now, a much appropriate way to be able to scale and also keep your transformations is to first press the N key, go into your transform, and make sure that all of the following is unlocked. Most of the time, especially if you are a PMX model, you might see locks on the rig. Make sure you're also on object mode while you're at it, and make sure everything is disabled like this. Then you're going to use the S key to scale your model, big and small. Once you have the appropriate size, you're going to then go right into object, click on apply, and then click on all transformations, so that way when you press Alt S, Alt G, Alt R for resetting scale, movement, and rotation, they will actually stay permanently. Now, if you do want to change a pose, like you want the legs together for some reason, you can also try freezing transformations for that as well, but usually your default rig should be fine unless you wanted to make your model into the H pose. So let's get started with the source engine export settings. Now what we're going to first do is we're going to convert our FBX file, which is now the Blender model that's in our project. We're going to convert that into the DMX file, which is basically the project format for SourceFilmMaker. And then we're going to turn that DMX file into an MDL format, which will be the model for SourceFilmMaker that SourceFilmMaker will be detecting as a model rather than a project. So the first thing is we're going to set an export path. So what you're going to do is you're going to be setting up a folder in your desktop. As you can see, I've done that here. And basically, you're just going to make a folder where you want your DMX file to be at. You can make any folder however you like. If you do have some issues with organizing your files, I do have also in the description kind of like a setup, a base setup that is also very beneficial, so that way you can stay organized. It does come with the Blender format, the SourceFilmMaker rig, and all of the other resources that I have. So yeah, you can basically have that set up if you're very bad with organizing. But other than that though, just set it however you like. Just make a folder in your desktop, name it DMX or something like that, project, whatever, and basically go to File Explorer. And once you have the folder open, you're gonna go to the top part where there's like a file path. You're gonna right click on it, copy address, and then you're going to paste it right here, so that way the add-on will know where to put your DMX file at. We're gonna leave the export format as DMX, so that way we can ensure that we're using the newest format for project files. SMD, on the other hand, is an older version of the project files. You can still use SMD if you want. If you're the type that uses SMD, you can use it, but I prefer DMX since it's much brand new and just much better overall. Now the target up axis, we're going to leave it as Z because on Blender you can see that it's Z axis up. So you can use that, but if your model is facing the wrong way, you can also change it if you want. But it's most preferred if you change the model's position, so that way it's facing upwards as Z-axis. Now, engine path. I should have already set this up for you, but in case it's red by any chance, whether you have you don't have a program file x86, what you're basically going to do is you're going to look at your program files, whichever Steam is located. You're going to go into the Steam apps, Common, SourceFilmMaker, Game, and then the bin. And you're going to copy and paste the address that I've explained, and you're going to paste it right here. This will basically help define the engine of SourceFilmMaker, since that is required with the exporting. Now, material path, we are not going to put anything in it. We will be defining the material path in the QC file, so this is not important. In fact, it'll probably mess up your materials and basically the setup. So please be mindful of that, okay? Now, the weight link cull threshold is basically, this is mainly because SourceFilmMaker does not support weight paint that's more than 3 bones. So I will explain. So basically, let's say you want to weight paint the thigh, right here. So you weight paint the thigh, right? But then you also, in those vertice groups right there, you also weight paint the hips, the buttocks, and then these other bones right here. That would mainly be 1, 2, 3, 4. That's about like 4 weight links, which is not supported by SourceFilmMaker. You can either go into the weight paint settings right here, the weight paint tab, click on the vertices right here, make sure that everything is selected, and then you can go into weights, then go to limit total, and then set the number to 3 if you like for all groups. But I do not recommend this. It's honestly, you're probably gonna get really weird weight paint results, so I do not recommend this. But on the other hand, Weight Link Coal actually does a much better job when it comes to this. So the values I highly recommend is to put 0.2 or 0.3 if you ever have an error regarding too many weight links. So make sure to put those values. If it still gives you the error, you might need to put a higher value, but you can also leave it at 0 if your model is perfectly fine with just 3 links. So yeah. And you can also check out for updates. You can check out the Steam community if you need some extra help, and also the help right here if you want to learn more about the Source Engine export tools and other stuff, especially when it comes to issues and errors. So you can actually click on check for updates, and I have mine installed as the newest version. So yeah. Now right here, Source Engine exportables. This is basically kind of like your collection. So this is basically, I made a collection with my name, and I've kind of have my set up here. I have my bone groups, my rig, my model mesh, and my armature right here. So there you go. All that good stuff right there. And of course right here it detects the armature and the mesh right here. So that is very good. You don't need to touch the other things. Vertex animation, you don't need to touch that either, or you don't need to touch flex properties. If you want to go more in depth with these two, there in the description also I have, there is this one guy who's actually really good when it comes to SourceFilmMaker. If by any chance you want to go more extreme with your models, I highly recommend check out his channel. His name is Private Jack, which you can check his YouTube channel down below. And if you need more info such as the rigging or animations even and all that good stuff, or even body groups, definitely check his channel out. He's really amazing with his explanations, and he even has like a big guide on his Steam, which is really helpful. And while it is for 2.79, if you apply your knowledge, it works really well when it comes to using 2.8 or even 2.9. And by the way, this is Blender 2.9D2, if in case you're wondering. So yeah. Now, what you can do also, once we'll go over the QC file in just a little bit, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna export our DMX file. So make sure that your model is sized up properly, make sure that your rigs are named properly, make sure everything works properly on your model the way that you want it set up. And another big thing also before we export, you need to take a really good look at your materials too. Make sure that you also know that your materials are at least not too much. Now for my model, yes, you see there's a lot of materials, but of course it's best to try and merge all your parts together, so that way your model can stay well optimized. But yeah, other than that though, it's very important that you name your materials properly and make sure they have simple names, because we are going to really need it for setting up our materials and textures in SourceFilmMaker, which will we be using via VTF Edit program, which please make sure you also download that as well, so that way you can get the proper material formats for your character. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna start exporting your DMX file. Now in my case I already have a DMX file, but make sure you click on export and you're going to click on either scene export or the collection you made. It's usually preferred to do scene export, but assuming that you might have cameras or lights and stuff, you might want to remove the extra stuff or any other models and make sure to keep it like this setup. Or just make sure you have a collection that contains your model data, so that way you can export just that alone. So yeah. And once you have your DMX file and it works properly, you might experience some errors, which another couple errors I can also explain is high poly count. So you cannot have, I would say, try to avoid models that are over 200,000 tries. Now for my case, surprisingly, my model is 161,000, and it's because I had to remove my wings and stuff. and some other extra details. But you know, as long as it's below 200,000 tries, try to keep it also under 170,000 tries, so that way you can export without issues, especially when compiling with your QC file. And another thing, you cannot have no more than 128 blend shapes. Any more and you will have errors with compiling. So please make sure to be aware that this is the max count. Also, there is also a max count when it comes to bones. I would try not to go no more than about, let's say, approximately 300-ish, 500-ish. This really, like I said, I'm not really sure about the limit per se, but just try to keep your rig as simple as possible, and that way it'll be able to work fine. And even I had to take the time to re-rig my hair, since my hair contained too many bones. I had to reduce the count, and I even added one bone for the cowlick and then one bone for the side hairs and stuff. So make sure that you are aware that there is limits with bone count, polygon count. I believe there is a limit to material count, but I've never really experienced that, but I will assume that most likely. So please make sure to try and merge as many materials as possible. So yeah. And once you have your DMX file exported, this is where we're going to start off with the compiling stage. Now, the thing about the QC file is that you do need some coding knowledge. Just a little bit, not too, not very extreme, but just a little bit. But don't worry, because I got you covered, since I do have a base QC file in the description below, which we will be filling out together. So why don't we get started with that, shall we? Okay, so for this part of the tutorial, you need Notepad++ for this case. Now, you can use Notepad, the normal one on Windows, but it's highly recommended to use Notepad++ to keep things organized, since there's numbers and it just looks more organized, honestly. But yeah, so I'm going to be going over the base QC file. Now, yours base QC file will not look like this. This is for my model specifically, but I will still go over the parts of the QC file, so that way you can better understand, kind of like the simple version. There are QC files that go much more advanced, such as body groups, skin families, and then also parts with animations and just a lot more crazier stuff, and even something called QCI, which is basically, if I were to dumb it down, think of it like UV eyes, sorta. Kinda like that, but not really. They have like their own controls and stuff. So there's stuff that's like that, but I usually recommend that for like more human-like models. Anime models, I do not recommend saying QC eyes, so please do not use QC eyes on an anime model unless you want to. But yeah, so we're gonna start off with the first part. So yes, we do need $signs for each line of code, and as I said, most of this is pretty much set up for you. You just have to fill in the parts that says fill in the blank, basically. So, basically right here, this first line is your model name. This is where you want to name your MDL file, as shown here. Now, this is basically going to go into the models folder in SourceFilmMaker. So you can go ahead and go to the models folder of SourceFilmMaker. You can make a folder that says Kanafuiko or your Steam name, then the character's name, and then the name of the file itself. So basically have it something like this, if that makes sense. And for the next part, we are going to be defining where the DMX file is at. So that way it takes the DMX file and turns it into this MDL file right here. So I named it to body right here, but you can name it however you like. You can change this to whatever. Now I'm gonna pause it right here. I really want to emphasize this, but I did not emphasize this in the recording. But if your model is in multiple pieces, you need to copy and paste that line that you've set up, and make sure that you define every single DMX that you have exported out if your model is in multiple pieces. So I highly recommend, please keep your model in one single piece and make sure everything's joined as one single model. But if your model has to be in multiple pieces, please make sure to copy the line of code that's defining where the DMX is, and make sure to paste it and then define the other DMX file, if that makes sense. But yeah, continue on with the tutorial. Robot or something, but I left it a body just to keep things simple. And then I defined a path for my DMX file. And yes, I highly recommend, please make sure to have the file name right in the end, otherwise your QC file will not be able to detect it. So please make sure the DMX file is there. So it's kind of like what you put in the source export settings on the first part where you're defining where you want to export the DMX, except you just add the last part right here. Now for this part, I have two paths for materials. Now by default, I've set it to where it'll just, all your materials should be at the materials folder inside source. But if you want to put it in a different place, you can also define it like this. So basically right here, this is stating that that from the materials folder, there is a folder inside named Kanahuiko, and in that folder right there, that is where all of the materials should be located. So that's kind of like a secondary place for where the materials will be at. But of course, you can always just leave it just like this. But do keep in mind, if you are going to make multiple models, I highly recommend try to organize where your materials will be at. But here's the thing also that I had experience, which is an issue. Even sometimes I could define like a material path. Sometimes the textures won't even load at all, and sometimes just this alone helps. So if you ever experience an issue where your materials or textures don't even read at all, and even if you put in the correct folder and this is read correctly and all that, and it still gives you the issue where your character's pink or something like that, maybe try using this and all that. I believe Private Jack goes more in depth on this in his theme tutorial, which I highly recommend you check it out, so that way you can make sure to set those materials right. I've also set mine to opaque right here, but you can also set to mostly opaque, especially if you have like semi-alpha stuff. For my case, my model is 100% opaque, but you can also set it to mostly opaque to make sure that the alpha stuff are also being read. And for the surface prop, I've set to flash. You don't really need to have this, but I just set like this because why not? So yeah. And right here, this is basically a type of physics in SourceFilmMaker. So this is basically called like jiggle bones. Think of jiggle bones like the VRM spring bones or Blender's wiggle bone physics sorta. It's nothing like MMD rigid bodies, since rigid bodies are actually more accurate sorta. Since they do have like, sometimes like when you have the skirt moving down, the gravity actually happens with rigid bodies. But for jiggle bones, it's like gravity doesn't even exist sorta. It's kind of thing, if that makes sense. Like you could be upside down, your hair could be like plastic or something like that. But basically, this just allows your just moving physics sorta. So I have one for my chest. They're not, I mean they move though, but yeah. So there's a couple for my chest, and you can see the things here. But yeah, most of this is like the stiffness, the damping, like kind of like heaviness, mass over here, the length, and then the constraint on how much of an angle it moves, or how much of an angle it'll be restricted to, and all that. Private Jack also has a more in-depth explanation on these settings right here, but it's mainly just a trial, like, you know, play with the numbers and experiment. However, it does take a while to mess around with these settings, and sometimes weird stuff can happen, but overall, the settings I have set, they're pretty okay. but may not be the best for your taste. So yeah, I have a couple. You just basically take this section here, just copy and then enter and then paste it if you want to add a new jiggle bone. And then you add your things, and make sure to also have the bone name right here exactly the same, otherwise it will not work. So make sure that they have the exact name right here, and make sure that the brackets are set properly like this. If a bracket is messed up or something like that, then the QC file will refuse to compile. Now, on the last part, this is very important, but this is basically where the animations will be read. Now, for this case, I do not have an animation on my character. So, for this case, I've set a sequence. I've named it idle. I set it to the name kind of Fuyuko DMX, and I set the FPS to 1 because there's no animations. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you could set it to 60 or 600 or whatever the heck stuff, but I just set it to 1 because there's nothing happening. It doesn't matter. So you don't put it at 60. Put it to 1. Unless you have an animation, then worry about the FPS. But this line here defines any animations. So yeah. But other than that, though, that's pretty much the QC file that I have set up. I am aware that this may not work for everybody, which I highly recommend. Please check out Private Jack's tutorial on the QC file setup, because as I said, this QC file may not work for everybody since it is a base and some people might input the wrong information or their computers are set differently or something like that. But I have tried my best to at least make this QC file at least universally compatible. So the one you guys have should be able to work fine. Just make sure to fill in the information correctly and you should be good to go. So yeah, but other than that, let's move on to setting up VTF textures and VMT materials. So this is the second to last part of the SourceFilmMaker conversion process. This is where we're going to set up our textures and our materials for our SourceFilmMaker models. So what we're going to do is we're going to start taking our textures, which are the PNGs, the JPEGs, the TGA files, and all that, and we're going to be able to make them into VTF format and then VMT for materials. So remember, VTF is texture and VMT is materials. Think of it. Think that. Okay, think that right now. So we're going to go into File on the top left, which is cropped out on OBS since my GPU sucks and I'm using Windows Capture on OBS. You're going to click on Import, Control I, and you are going to load in a texture. So give me a moment to load in a texture. So I'm going to load a texture for, let's see, I'm going to load one for my eye. So I'm going to load in my eye texture. Now, sadly, you cannot see this, but I will have a screenshot in, after video editing. You're going to see something like the VTF options. You can mess with these settings however you like, but we're just going to continue on with the default settings. So click on OK for that case and wait for your texture to be imported. So right here, that's my eye texture right there. And what we're going to do now is we are going to go to File, Save As, and we are going to name this file whatever. For the textures, they don't have to be the same name as the materials, but if you want for organizing purposes, please make sure that they are the same name. But other than that, the VTF files, you can kind of name it whatever, I guess, but for the VMTs, they have to be the exact same name as the ones in Blender. Otherwise, your model will not have its materials. So please remember that. So I'm going to basically save it, and once I have the VTF file, I'm going to then go into the Tools tab on the top part. You're going to click on Create VMT File, and once again, I sadly do not have that option popping up, but to kind of explain it, you're going to see a textures where once you export your VTF file, you're going to see it loaded into the base texture 1. And please make sure that that is being detected right there. You can also load in a normal map if you like, or any other maps that you desire, but we're going to stick with just a texture only. We're going to then go into options, and what you're going to then do, which I'll have a screenshot of for the proper settings, but we're going to set up the shader to vertex lit generic, so that way we can see our model. And if your model is opaque, please make sure that everything is unchecked. No checks in any box. If it's opaque, it's perfectly fine. Don't touch anything. And also make sure that translucent is off, because sometimes when you have a VTF export and you try to create the material, sometimes translucent might be checked on accident. Please make sure that is not checked. But once you have that, you can click on create and make sure to check Blender and make sure that the material for that is the exact same name. Okay, make sure everything with Blender is set up exactly how you would in SourceFilmMaker, basically. I cannot stress that enough. Now, for Vroid models, on the other hand, or anything with alpha textures, because I'm aware that that is an issue, and a lot of people are probably going to ask, oh, what about the alpha and the Vroid models? How can I make sure that works? Well, on the screen also, I should have settings set up already for that. So basically, what you're going to do is you're going to be saying alpha test, vertex alpha, and no cull, so that way your transparency on your eyes will work. You can also add translucent if you like, but that's basically just making it transparent. So don't enable that unless it's necessary. But other than that, you just need those 3 checkboxes so that way the transparency will work. So yeah, and make sure you save that. And other than that though, that's pretty much the basics of VTF Edit. You can do a lot more with it and set up much more realistic details if you like on your model. And there's also more information about VTF Edit, not only with Private Jack's tutorials, but also with Steam forums. Steam forums are really great when it comes to figuring out any other specific bugs or anything like that, so please check out the Steam forums for SourceFilmMaker, and that way it can definitely help you out get more information about VTF files and VMT files, especially when it comes to stuff like glowing or anything like that. But now let's move on to the last part of the tutorial, which is the QC compiling. Now, before we get started with the QC compiling, I also need to let you guys know that when it comes to your VTF and your VMT files, please make sure that they go into the materials folder under SourceFilmMaker. I should have a picture popping up that should show you exactly how the link address will look like and how everything is all set up. So please make sure that you copy and paste all your VTF and your VMT files over there, and make sure that everything works fine, and make sure that everything's all in the same folder or all together basically, so that way you can prevent any difficulties. Now, like I said, this is you gotta be super careful for every step, because SourceFilmMaker is full of paths and you really need to be careful on what you type, otherwise stuff are not going to work. So please make sure to be careful, recheck everything, every little thing, even the QC file and where the VTF and the VMT files are at, and even check the VMT files like search when it comes to finding the texture, so that way everything works perfectly fine. I am stressing this out because when I started SourceFilmMaker, I literally stressed the heck out of this part, and sometimes I would mess up on a lot of stuff. But let's move on with the final part, which is the QC compiling. Now, for security reasons, I have renamed the path to my name. I have not rewired my computer to have this name officially, since it's under my actual name. So you will not be seeing the QC compile button there, but there should be a button if you copy and paste the link to where the QC file is. So right here, this is the QC file. You make sure that you're defining where it is. Make sure to select the file and copy the address and paste it here so that way it's being read. And also, I should have a game path already defined for you, but in case it doesn't work, please make sure to go into your Steam Apps, Common, SourceFilmMaker, game user mod, and that is where everything will be going, since this is mainly for, you know, it's more of like you're customizing that, hence the name user mod. This is kind of like your own sort of mod thingy, and not like a TF2 character, unless you are doing a TF2 character. But even then, though, please stick with user mod for this case. It's much less of a hassle if you keep it like this. So yeah. But what you're gonna do is that you are going to click on the button that says QC, the compiled QC or whatever name you put it. So click the button, and you should be able to give it a couple minutes. Probably it takes about like 100 seconds to process, but it could be longer. Really depends on your computer. Now, the thing about the QC compiling is that most of the time, you're probably going to get an error immediately after clicking. Most of the time. And I can only say, like I say, it really depends on what you've done. But I highly recommend, if you ever have an error with a QC, which I have a feeling you probably click the button right now. There's an error, and you're like, kinda, what's the fix? Say it right now. Well, first of all, what you're gonna do is kind of define where the issue is. So you're gonna go into your Windows tab of Blender, and you're gonna click on the toggle system console there. So it's the top left, Windows, toggle system console. And what you're going to do, which I do not have it shown on OBS since it's a separate window, but for screenshot purposes, I should show you how the console will look like and a possible error that the QC file might have read. So basically, you're going to be using this little console thing here to detect any errors that has happened with your compiling. So please read very carefully. Do not skim. Please don't skim. You better please read it, because it tells you exactly where the error is. It'll tell you what line of the QC file is incorrect, or if it'll tell you that there's like a limitation on the model that SourceFilmMaker doesn't support that you need to fix. So please make sure to read the error and follow along with what the error is. If they're by any chance saying that there's, like I said, they should tell you what line exactly is messed up, and they kind of might give you a reason for the error, but sometimes it can be quite confusing. But all I can say is please make sure to check back on what I've explained for each section. Make sure that you've done it right. Check Private Jack's tutorials. They'll also ensure that you're doing it correctly. So please make sure to check those out as well to make sure everything's going fine. And if by any chance that you do not want to do either of those, you can comment down your issue or private message me your issue, and we can explain together the issue that you're having. But please, I recommend check back with what I've said before. Check Private Jack's tutorial before answering to me, since I'm basically repeating what those two tutorials would say most of the time. But even then, there's some issues that might actually be quite brand new to me. So yeah. And if you want to close the toggle, the little Python little window thing, I highly recommend do not press the X button at all. But on 2.92, the X button should be grayed out, so that way you won't exit out. But if you want to get rid of it, just go back to the Windows tab, click on Toggle System Console, and it should go away. Now, once you have your QC file compiled, what we're going to then do is that we are going to take a look at our model. So we're going to click on the button that says Launch HLMV, otherwise known as Half-Life Model Viewer. So click on that button, and once that window starts popping up on my screen, you should be able to see the window, which I will get rid of the Blender view, and I'll show you how the viewer looks like. So what we're going to then do is you're going to go to your file, which is on the top left. You're going to load your model, and you're going to find the file for whichever your model's at. So kind of Fuiko in this case. Now, when I load my model, you might see something like this. This is basically what not finding your textures or basically either not finding your textures or not finding your materials. So for this case, what you're going to do is that you are going to check the QC file, make sure you set everything right, then check your materials folder, and you're going to make sure that everything is set right. For my case, most of the time, this is actually the error that I go through, to where I put my I will put my materials and textures in the kind of Huyuko folder, but they're not being read by the QC. So what I do is that I would copy and paste those materials to the actual material folder itself, and then once I go back to the viewer right here, I go to File, Refresh, and then there you go. You now see me in full color in the correct texture. So yeah, stuff like that can happen if you see weird stuff like that. But yeah, so what you can do is that you could do Shift and left click to move your model around. You can do Control left click to change the light direction if you like. You can also zoom in and out with the right mouse button, hold it down, and then of course click on the sides right here where the ring is to kind of like rotate where the model is at. So that way you can have a much closer look at how your model looks right here. And yeah, you can see the freaking jiggle physics everywhere. But yeah, so you will also see some other settings here like rendered, like you can see the normal mapping if anything. You can also see the wireframe of the model, any hitboxes. Since SourceFilmMaker is a game engine, they do have hitboxes. So as shown here, they've set up some hitboxes, so pretty cool, pretty cool. And they have just other stuff that you can check out and play around with. You can check the sequence if you have any custom animations. Model, which will show you the VMTs and any errors. In this case, all my files are just fine. Everything loaded properly. Tells you all your information on how many polygons it is and all that. Materials, skin families, and just other important information. Then you have your flex, which will be you testing out the expression. So kind of testing out some of the iPhone blend shapes I've accidentally added right here, so I could do that. It's pretty light, but yeah. But I could also enable like anger. I can enable joy and just other expressions basically. But yeah, other than that, you can also click on random as well, which you'll have a horrible look. I'm not gonna click on that, but yeah, so you can check out your physics, but in this case we use the jiggle physics for this case, so we don't have anything. Bones, attachments, if there's any like weapons on your avatar, IK rule for any IKs and events and just so on. But pretty much these are just like extra tabs. You don't really need to know them. The thing I would focus more on is the model and flex tab, since the flex tab will allow you to test out your expressions and stuff, while the model tab will let you know if there's any issues with your VMT files not loading. So yeah, and that's pretty much it. Now all you have to do is go into SourceFilmMaker, and then what you'll do is that you will then open it up, start a brand new project, which I'll actually demonstrate in just 1 second. Now that we're in SourceFilmMaker, I am going to quickly show you how you can load your models. Now this is going to be quite tricky since a lot of windows will be popping up and Windows Capture cannot capture all this. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to start off a brand new session. You're going to name it whatever you like, and then you're going to set up a directory on where you want the DMX file to be. As I said, the DMX file is basically the project file of your SourceFilmMaker project. You can set the frame rate to 24 or however you like if you're doing some basic animation, or if you're going to do some simple posing and pictures, you can set it to whatever FPS you like, but I would set it to 24 for any case. Now what you're going to then do is you're going to click on create, and what you're going to then do is you're going to right click, since there's no map loaded, you're going to right click on load map, then you're going to choose any map here, but for this case I'm going to choose the typical stage that's mostly used by everyone, that's called stage.bsp. BSP is actually a file format for SourceFilmMaker when it comes to stage models or any map models that are used in SourceFilmMaker. So that's there are many tools that can actually deal with that, but that is not for this tutorial. Nor do I try to mess around with the the darn stage map. So yeah, but even then, though, the default are pretty fine, and you can also go to the Steam Workshop for SourceFilmMaker if you want some additional maps to mess around with. But yeah, so what you're going to do is left click and drag, and you might see some black flicker, and this is because of the Windows update, so thank the Windows update for this. I believe there is a fix for this, but I have not bothered to fix it, so you'll have to deal with this for now. But what you're going to then do is you're going to go into the animation set editor, which is a big blank in the left side, right click it, click on the part that says create animation set for new model, then you're going to select your MDL file. So you're going to then go and find your file, which should be under user mod. So make sure that the mod filter goes for user mod, and then you're going to find the folder for user mod. So let me quickly find that. And there I have it. I found it, and I should have a screenshot if it's not shown on OBS, but you would see something as shown, which basically shows the model as a T-pose for my case. And what you're going to then do is you're going to click on open, and then boom, there is your model there. You could then click on the button. So in order to start moving your model around, go to the timeline area and click on the button in the middle, the one you see the three buttons here. Make sure you have the middle one selected, and then you're going to press on the W key to move it. Press the middle mouse button, and then you're going to hold the shift to make sure that it stays on the floor, and then boom, you have your model here. You can also click on the tiny plus button on the left side of the model, which is under the animation set editor, to see more of the rig. And as you can see here, I have all my bones defined, and I still have some unknown bones such as the blend shapes and all that. But other than that though, most of the bones that I have are defined under the SourceFilmMaker. So the BIP will allow me to have automatic IKs, and there's actually an add-on for SourceFilmMaker that allows you to do it much easily, so keep that in mind. As for blend shapes though, in order to make them active, you're going to then go zoom in on your face, of the model's face. You're going to click on the click on your blend shape, and you're going to click on this little slider right here, and your model should move. Now if you have the first button on the timeline area here enabled, if you try to move the wing, you will not have it work. It will refuse to move. So please make sure to have this button on in order to have your face move. Please make sure you do that. And for moving your bones, you can select one of the bones in the hierarchy. So I'm going to select spine, and then you can press the E key for rotating. This is kind of like, if you're a Maya user, you can actually get the shortcuts pretty easily, because this is the Maya shortcuts. Same with Unity. Unity has similar ones too. But then you can rotate the body around, and then you can also press the R key for a different rotation setup. But yeah, other than that though, you are able to pose up your model and make really nice pictures and all that good stuff right there. And that is basically how you convert your model to SourceFilmMaker and get it to work properly. There's a lot of other stuff that you can do with SourceFilmMaker, which I recommend check out Private Jack's videos for SourceFilmMaker's setup. You can also do some other stuff, such as converting the models for Gmod, setting them up for mods with games such as Left 4 Dead, or even TF2. I guess I've never really seen anyone do that with TF2, but you know, I guess there's mods for TF2. I'm not sure. But just to say like an example, I'm not sure if it's legit, but whatever. You could do whatever, I guess. I'm pretty sure mostly on Left 4 Dead 2 you can do mods where you can replace the characters as your own. TF2 I don't think so, but I know Left 4 Dead 2 it does that, so yeah. But other than that though, that's pretty much all I have to teach you about SourceFilmMaker conversions. I hope that my guide helps you. I hope that the resources I provide also helps you out a lot to make your SourceFilmMaker conversion process much more easier and hopefully as fast as possible. But as I said, this is a beginner's tutorial, so it's definitely going to take a while for you to learn everything. But with trial and error, you will be able to make it. And if you have any other questions whatsoever, please let me know in the YouTube comments. You can private message me your issues, and I will gladly help you out. But yeah, that's all I have to say though. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share the video so that way other people can benefit from this tutorial and learn more about converting their models into SourceFilmMaker, so that way they can have their own SourceFilmMaker model as well to play with and all that goody stuff. So yeah. That's all I have to say though. Have a nice day, everyone. Let me know if you have any questions. This is kinda Huiko, sayonara everyone, and enjoy the tutorial, and I hope this tutorial actually works. Goodbye! Sayonara!